to Home Sweet Loan. We are so excited to have our guest with us today on our next episode, and we are going to cover the art of the consultation. But we have Chuck and Pat Vosburgh with us, and they are over in the Gulf area here in Florida. A fantastic team with Next Home. And tell us a little bit about who you guys are and your background, and then we'll dive right in.
Well, thank you for having us today.
Thanks so much.
We're Chuck and Pat Vosburgh, everybody's friends in Florida, and we've been working together as a husband and wife team for 10 years. Pat has been in the real estate business forever, and I was a commercial photographer before becoming a realtor. So I joined Pat in her business 10 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. It's been great to be together all the time, to work together.
That's awesome. That doesn't work for everybody.
No, it's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody, but
we're together all the time.
It works really great for us.
Yeah, I love it. I'm sure it gives you a chance to really, everybody's got strengths, and I'm sure it gives you a chance to really play off of each other's strengths and, allow you to use your strengths in different ways and
weaknesses.
I didn't want to say the word weaknesses.
No.
It's
we
true.
have definitely
and
our weaknesses.
You a chance to really play off of that and allow each of you to do the things maybe you're passionate about and that you love doing. So very, very cool. Right. Before we dive into the content, I really, I'm starting to do this a little bit of an icebreaker. So it's a little bit of a rapid fire, just fun questions to learn a little bit about you guys. So we'll go through them. There are 4 questions. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Historical figure. Well, I don't know about historical.
It doesn't have to be historical.
Okay. I would probably have dinner with my dad. Because my dad died a really long time ago in a car accident, and it was immediate. Like he died in the car accident in 1990. So that's a very long time ago. And there were a lot of things unsaid. He totally was such a great dad. And, but I felt like I didn't tell him that I love him enough.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
That's a really good one. Yeah. Cause immediately you go to like a famous person, but it doesn't have to.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck, anything come to mind?
Well, there's so many that come to mind, but I'm just going to go with the one that popped in my mind first, and that would be Jesus.
I love that. That. Good. Okay. What's the most ridiculous or unexpected thing that's ever happened to you during a showing or a listing appointment?
A showing was just actually both of us going into the house, and the agent failed to the house had no electricity, and the agent failed to report to us that the house was infested with, what was it?
Fleas.
That's right. I thought it was termites.
And it's happened twice.
And it happened twice to us. So we walked out. I had jeans on, and so did Chuck. And we got in our car, and there were thousands of them jumping all over the place. I jumped out of the car.
I would have freaked out. I might have freaked out.
I screamed.
It was terrible.
And we had to come home. We had to, go in through the garage, take our clothes off, and just put them in the
bomb everything. Yeah.
And we had to bomb the car.
Oh,
and I really called the agent, and I was so upset. And he knew about it.
I was going to say, he didn't know about that, right?
No, he knew about it, but he failed to disclose it. So to me, that was kind of like...
Yeah, that was bad.
Oh, that was a bad one. And I guess for me, the one that comes to mind is when I fell through a floor.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably no fun. How far was the fall?
I caught myself at about waist level.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you weren't hurt.
No injuries. Boy, I'll tell you, I popped back up. I'm like, nope, nothing to see here.
Yep, that didn't just happen. I love it. Okay. If you weren't in real estate, what would you be doing?
If we weren't in real estate? Is that what you asked?
Uh-huh.
Well, I was a social worker for 25 years, and I absolutely loved it. And so social work is really my passion. I'd probably be doing that still.
Okay. And what would be yours, Chuck? Is it photography? Is that where you'd be, or?
I'd be teaching photography.
Teaching photography. Awesome. Okay. And if you had to describe each other in 2 words, what would they be?
You want to go first?
In 2 words, did you say?
2 words.
2 words.
That's tough, right?
There's so many.
I know.
Many.
Okay, I'll give you mine for Pat. Relentless and persistent.
I like it. I like it. Yep. That's
and
good
I know
for
they're
realtors
synonyms.
too. Realtors and salespeople, yeah.
Yeah, my hashtag is relentless.
I like that.
How about we go with smart and nice?
I was going to say kind and giving. You're very kind and giving.
Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah, you are.
See, now we all feel really good about this, right?
Oh, I feel great.
Well, awesome. Well, we're going to dive into the meat of what we're chatting about here. And there's been so many changes and so many things that have changed in our industry. It's always evolving. But this past year with the change with NAR and the buyer's consultation, I thought it would be a good way for us to talk about, because you guys do a very thorough job and provide a lot of value. And I think that agents are really still evolving in this and how they set up their buyer's consultation. So we're going to talk about buyer's consultation and listing consultation. But we're going to start with the buyers. And I want to just learn a little bit about how you approach the buyer's consultation as a team.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because with all these changes that have come around, it's never been more important to prove your value. And Pat and I were kind of lucky, because we were sort of already doing that we just, without even thinking about it, we're sitting down first with our potential clients and laying out the plan of action. And people want somebody with a plan, because real estate is hard. It's easy to forget as real estate agents and brokers that this is a big deal, and it's extremely stressful. It's extremely complex. We do it every day, so we take it for granted. Yeah. But we have to remember that to the person sitting on the other side of that table, this is a huge deal, and it's very scary for them.
Yeah. So laying the plan out and sitting down and say, here's what's going to happen, and here's what we're going to talk about, and here's what the process looks like, really relieves a lot of stress.
It really does. So, so here's the nuts and bolts of it. So it starts off before we actually sit down. And when we sit down, it could be via Zoom or over the telephone for people who are moving, because we have a lot of people who are moving into our area here in Florida. So it could be in person or not. But the first thing is a text before the meeting saying, okay, we're confirming our meeting, and here are the 5 things we're going to cover. And we'll go over them one by one. But just sending that text, it does 2 things. It shows we're organized, also makes sure that they remember. And, well, 3 things, I guess. And then the third thing, and this is the most important, is that we have a plan. That this is the agenda for our meeting. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And that helps people to understand that we are professionals. We're coming in here. We know what we're doing. We've got a structure to all this.
We're not just flying in on the seat of our pants, just kind of learning, figuring it out as we go. I really do love the part that shows you're organized.
Yes.
A lot of times, I think a lot of these meetings, whether they're happening or in person or they're happening via Zoom, you're not spelling out, here's the things we're going to cover. So if they're interviewing other agents, you really, really stand out with that. And it shows you're organized, prepared, and very professional. So I do love that you guys do that up front. So when you're in the meeting and you're, really starting to build rapport, whether it's face-to-face or not, what are some of the things that you feel like you do to build trust and gain their commitment?
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because one thing that we see a lot, and Pat, you can back me up on this, is that agents spend too much time talking about how great they are. And it's human nature. We always want to establish ourselves as an expert, but there's a stealth way of doing that where you don't really have to say anything. The first thing that we do is we sit down and we just ask them, okay, well, what do you have in mind? And let the person talk. Ask a lot of questions. Let them explain what they've got in mind, because after all, it really is all about them. And it shows that you care. it also gives you the information that you need to tailor the presentation to address what their needs are and what their concerns are, so that by the end of it all, you've answered all their questions, and it's just a matter of filling out the paperwork at that point.
Right. Yeah, I do think you're right. There's so many times that we do all the talking, me, as in our side of the table, and we don't listen enough, right?
Yes.
We don't let them talk, and that in itself is what builds rapport, is letting them talk and letting them feel like they're heard and that you care and you're listening and all those things. And I do think that that's where we miss the boat a lot, is by we do too much talking.
Yeah, you're
listening
right.
is really an important skill, and also kind of deciphering what they're really saying. Someone, I just was on the phone this morning with someone, and they gave me a budget for they want to buy land, but then they saw something and it was 100,000 less. So what you have to kind of really listen to. So do they really want to spend that for the land, or do they want to spend less?
Yeah.
So it's really deep diving, I guess, also. Mm-hmm. And asking a lot of really important questions. And also, we really ask a lot of questions about, a lot of people move here for their the lifestyle here.
Sure.
And you have to kind of figure that out too. What do you expect your lifestyle to look like here? Because everyone has a different version of what their lifestyle is going to look like here. Some people are still working, some are retirees, some don't want to live in a 55 plus community.
Right.
Some do. They only want that. So you really have, listening is a very, very important skill, like everyone was saying here.
Well, right, and that way, if you're not really listening in getting the right information, then you end up sending them things that really are totally not what they're looking for, right? And then it becomes, I hear a lot, the agent didn't listen to me. They weren't listening to what I wanted, or whatever that is. And so it's really a crucial step in the very beginning of the process that I do think is missed. I think we want to tell them what they want versus really diving in. And that's going to mess you up down the line with the trust.
Yes.
You're absolutely right, Kristen. And one thing that we hear constantly with people who have had an experience with an agent in the past is that they say the agent didn't really listen to them.
Yep.
And that's very consistent that we hear that comment.
Yeah. Well, it starts in the initial consultation. So building trust, listening, understanding what they're really wanting are very important facts. So what is, you think that, and this might just, we might have just answered that, but what would you say the biggest mistake agents make during the initial consultation?
Jumping straight into talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we do have to talk about ourselves, sure. But here's something to consider, is that by the very virtue that we're sitting there in front of the person, whether it be in person or virtual, that it's already assumed that we're able to do a great job.
Yeah.
So you've already crossed that threshold. That's assumed. So if you're going to talk about your qualifications, you have to put it in a framework where it's benefiting that person. So, for example, Pat and I are certified international property specialists. Well, yeah, big deal. We took some classes and we worked hard and passed a test. But what that means is, well, 20% of the people that buy in this area happen to be from another country. So it would be helpful if we know how to do transactions internationally.
Right.
And it would be helpful if we know how to deal with buyers and sellers who are from another country. So that's the benefit. The fact that we're great because we took some classes and are more educated doesn't mean anything unless it benefits that person.
It benefits the actual the recipient. Yeah. So that's a fantastic point, going on about some other things that may be very irrelevant. But when it comes to something that is important to that specific person on the other end, that's where you really want to highlight it, because then that does put them at ease. oh, they know what this is going to look like. They know what we're going to encounter, what to expect. So they're going to be more equipped to handle this type of situation versus somebody who's not. So fantastic point. It's okay to talk about yourself, but when it's relevant to the situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That makes
sense. They're going to get a feel for your competence in just the way that you present yourself.
Yeah. So how do you approach the different? So, I mean, obviously the way of the world is we are doing, even if you are local with somebody, you are doing a lot more virtual stuff. How do you approach it differently? How do you make sure that, because obviously in person, you tend to build rapport a little bit quicker and it's easier to do so. How do you feel like that changes when you get on a Zoom call like that?
You know, Kristen, it's actually exactly the same. Here's what I mean by that, is that we're the same here on video as we were if you were sitting right in front of us. And we know each other very well, and I think you can attest to this, that we're the same. And so for agents that are out there, you're going to have to do more virtual communication with people. That's just the way it is. And it's getting more and more so as people get more and more busy. So it's vital to get comfortable sitting in front of a camera, talking to somebody, looking straight into the camera instead of down at the person's picture, and just being normal.
Yeah.
Most folks get very stiff in front of a camera, and then that undermines your credibility because it shows that you're not comfortable.
Yeah, it is. If you're not used to doing video and you're not used to doing this type of interaction, it is hard to, see yourself and hear yourself talk and that kind of stuff. So I do think it's an adjustment. And I would say the biggest thing that people could do to force themselves outside of that comfort zone is to, get on with your family. I don't know, do something to get used to that, because it is the way of the world. And you still have to be able to establish that rapport and trust just like you would in person, or you'll end up missing a big piece of what's important of the consultation. So
I always say people, and I don't want to say which sex, but they're like, but my hair isn't perfect, my makeup isn't perfect, I look old. I'm like, okay, is that going to change when you meet somebody in person?
Yeah, they're going to find out.
I'm a woman of a certain age. I can't make myself be 30 again, you know? So you get what you get.
You look 30 to me.
Oh, you're so sweet.
See, he's kind. He's kind. Yeah, I like that.
So
let's get into the changes. How has your buyer's consult? So you've really been doing the same type of consultation all along, because you guys do a fantastic job. You're very thorough. How has it changed since the NAR changes? What has evolved for you? How have you adapted? How have you adjusted the way that you talk about the compensation and all of that?
Okay, well, we'll just go through it step by step.
Yeah.
So we've always explained how we get paid. That hasn't changed, but the way we get paid has changed, and it's changed a lot. So we just say, okay, and that's actually, you're kind of following our format exactly, Kristen. Is the next part is, okay, we've talked about what the person needs. We've talked about how we're going to be well suited to serve those needs. And then the next part is, okay, well, here's the nuts and bolts. Here's how the money works. So we first explain the way it's been in the past, because almost everybody knows that in the past, the seller would have an offer of compensation, and that's what we would get paid. So now, instead of that, there's no more offer of compensation. We agree on our compensation, and technically you're responsible for it. But what we're going to do is ask the seller to pay for it. And the way we do that is when we put in an offer, we ask them to credit you the amount that you're responsible for paying next home. So that, in essence, the seller is going to pay for it. Now, if it's a case where the seller is not willing to do that, well, you'll know about that in advance, and then we can decide how we want to move forward. But there's not going to be any kind of surprises where at the end of it all, you find out that, all of a sudden you owe money.
Yeah.
You're going to know every step of the way exactly what the situation is so that you can make a decision how you want to move forward.
Yeah.
So
And so
that's how we explain it.
on the other side, hearing that, nothing for me, now, of course, I'm in the industry, so I understand how all this works, but nothing there is like alarming, right? Like, oh my gosh,
No.
it's some big thing that I'm not going to be able to cover and how I can't buy. And so when you have those conversations now, majority of the time, obviously, I'm sure there's some one-offs, but is there any time where you feel like there's some resistance from the buyer?
Yeah, sometimes there is a little bit of resistance. And usually the nature of it is that one of two things. Either we haven't explained it clearly enough for that individual.
Okay.
Or they may have seen something in the news
and that's more like what it is.
that either wasn't accurate or wasn't clear. So it's really just a matter of explaining. So sometimes people will say, well, wait a minute, you mean I have to pay you? And it's just a matter of explaining, like, well, you always have.
You really always have. It's just been.
You really always have. You're the one bringing the money to the closing table. And the fact that you're giving it to the seller, and in the past, the seller turned around and gave part of it to our brokerage, isn't any different than it is now. It's just that now it's in a different part on the spreadsheet in the closing table.
Yeah, it really is just really identifying the fact that now we're really talking about it. It's still built into the price. It's always been built into the price. And so it's just a different conversation about it. How do you handle the buyer that says, I really just want to look. I'm not, I don't really want to sign this. I don't really want to talk about the compensation. I just really want to see houses and see if it's something that I want to do right now.
Then they're not our client because they have to sign. They have to sign the buyer broker agreement before we even show them one home.
Yeah. And of course we're required to do that.
We're required to do that.
But here's the interesting thing about this, Kristen, is that generally speaking, of course, there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, that's not going to come up because the first step to working with somebody is sitting down and going through all this material, because that's the first step.
Yeah.
We don't just jump into the middle of it, because that wouldn't be very wise for anybody involved. The client or potential client needs to understand what we're going to do and what the plan is.
Yeah.
If somebody's not willing to sit down with us and spend an hour in the beginning, then that's a giant red flag.
For you guys.
And maybe that's not a good prospect for us.
I must say that I don't even know what the percentage is. The majority of, I'm going to say almost 100% of our people that we do get, our clients, are referrals or sphere of influence.
Yeah.
We don't really use any kind of lead generation tools. And so when people come to us, they're already vetted. They already kind of know us because they've been referred to us by someone who they know, like, and trust. So for us, it might be a little bit different than maybe some other folks who do have a challenge of having someone come to them who is just, not somebody that has been referred to them, but just a lead coming in.
Cold
just
lead.
A cold lead.
Right.
And it's a lot different for them because they don't have that relationship already established.
And they're not as far down the path yet. I do have some advice for people who are not very far down the path, because I know that's very common, and we get them too, of course. So it's in that first telephone conversation. It's a very condensed version of what we've been talking about. And the first step is a pre-approval or proof of funds. And when people object to that, it's because you haven't first explained why that's important.
Right.
And really, with our presentation, we've already answered all the objections before they've even thought of them. Generally speaking, of course. But in that first telephone conversation with somebody who's not very far down the path, said, okay, well, look, we can start sending you some properties via email and kind of let you know what's out there. But before we can put in an offer or before we can go look at properties, we need to have a proof of funds or a pre-approval, because we can't submit an offer without those.
Right.
So there's no reason to go any further than just looking at them online if we're not able to make an offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't want to lose out on something by delaying getting these things, because if we find the perfect one and then you go into the process of getting a pre-approval, then chances are somebody else is going to get it because they were
how
ready.
do they even know that that's a big piece of what we do, obviously, on our side, is making sure that they're comfortable with the payment. There's a lot of times right now where somebody wants to buy at a certain price point and they qualify, so that's not a problem, but then they see the payment and they're like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. So now you've spent all this time and energy finding this $400,000 house. They think the payment should be X. It's not X, it's Y. And now there's a whole bunch of disappointment and frustration that they can't get what they want. And that changes the whole process going forward.
That's exactly right. And we try to explain to people why sitting down with Next Mortgage first is a very important part of the process, because that helps them identify what their target price range is going to be, so that they're not wasting their time looking at things that might not be comfortable.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I can see why you guys get to that last step of the conversation with the buyer broker agreement and compensation, and you don't really struggle to get their buy-in on it. You guys really do a great job laying up, your value and, listening and asking the right questions and diving into their needs and wants. And by that point, you've really gotten their buy-in and their commitment, because now they're vested in the conversation and who you are and who they are and all of that. And now we're just getting to the logistics of how this is going to work in the structure of it. So it makes total sense. And for me, sitting on the other side, it doesn't feel uncomfortable. So you guys obviously have very good success in the way that you're laying it out. So that's awesome.
And we ask a very important question, and I think this is vital. We say, okay, Kristen, does this sound like a good plan to you? And of course, you're going to answer yes, because obviously it's an awesome plan.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, all right, well, do you think we're the right people for you?
We do ask that question.
And if the answer is no, we'll refer them to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine. It's okay if it's no.
Yeah. Not everybody is a fit.
It's all right. But when they say yes, like, great, let's do the paperwork.
Yeah. Now,
it's just that simple. There's always paperwork. You have to do paperwork on everything. So it's not a big deal. We make it a big deal as agents, but it's not.
Do you guys feel
by the time you've done all this, it's just great. Well, let's just do the paperwork real quick and we'll get started now.
We'll get to the fun stuff. Yeah. Yes. Do you guys feel like this has changed and shifted? You've always been doing this buyer's consultation and an in-depth one, like not agents have always done that. Do you feel like it's changed and shifted and weeded out the serious buyers, and now you're really focused on the people that intend to truly buy? Or do you feel like that hasn't shifted just because you guys were kind of always doing this?
Oh, it's interesting you brought that up, and Pat, I know you've noticed this a lot, where if somebody's not willing to spend an hour up front getting through this little process to get started, they're not serious about buying anything, and they're not a good prospect for us.
Yeah.
And I know it's easy to say because we're established, but you have to be okay with letting some of them go.
100%.
Not everybody is a good investment of your time.
Yeah.
Your time is so valuable. Even if you're just starting off and you've got all the time in the world, a bad client can suck up all your time, and then you're spending all your time on something that won't ever come to fruition.
Time and money.
Instead of finding people who are good clients for you.
Yeah, time and money, and time is money, right? But
yes.
I think what this has helped agents do is determine where to focus their energy, right? I mean, there was many times in the past, years prior, where it was really a tough struggle. I would see an agent spend months and months on a client, and driving them, and hours, and all the things that go with helping a buyer, and last minute they just decide that they're going with another agent. And again, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen still today, some, right? But it is definitely on a much lower scale.
Or somebody may change their mind.
Sure.
We've had, in fact, this just happened with Pat, somebody she's been working with off and on for a very long time. They just changed their mind.
And that's okay.
Things changed.
Yeah.
And it's okay, because that's just part of the business. And when we do get paid, we get paid really well. And that kind of offsets the times where we don't get paid.
Sure. Yeah.
So it all evens out.
It all evens out. And who's to say that person's not going to come back? You've built obviously a strong enough rapport and relationship that they may be back.
That's
They're
right.
not leaving you to go to another agent. They're just, their plans have changed. So that's different. But yeah, I love the way you guys are approaching the buyer's consultation. What I love about the fact is that you guys really didn't have to change a ton. You were kind of already doing that. I don't see a lot of agents spend that full, solid first initial interaction in the depth that you guys do. And so that obviously goes to show the reward that you're getting, the success, and the client that you're getting for life after that is awesome.